Of course, every presentation situation is different, but a lot of them are a variation of the classic problem solution. Here's a problem, I have some ideas to fix it. And today I have a really good example of one. This is from Dr. Andreas Eenfeldt. And I first met Andreas 10, 12 years ago when he attended one of my presentations and seminars in Paris. And then I also recommended that you watch his presentation that he gave a year ago, which was on a live presentation on a stage in front of people, which I thought was a really good example. This one I think is even an even better example of a problem solution style presentation. So, the very basic kind of problem solution presentation, you have an introduction, you have the problem, you have the solution, and then some call to action. You just don't end it with a thank you, but what do you want the audience to do? And these boxes just represent how much information or how much time and how much information would go in each chunk. Sometimes the problem may take more explanation than the solution, and in other times the problem is more obvious, more understood, and in that case you might spend more time with the solution instead. And I think this example by Dr. Eenfeldt is a really good example. So Dr. Eenfeldt started his presentation with a really good, just right off the bat, started with a look back very quickly to what he was talking about a year ago, this idea of, let's make it simpler to eat better. And he talks about his mission and how this past year has been going well and many new people are on board. But, so there's a but. So this keeps us engaged, right? Things are going well, but there is a problem. And the problem is the food environment has not changed that much. Things have gotten perhaps a little bit better, but as we all know, it's still a mess. And you've heard a lot about things like Ozempic, and so he mentions very briefly that, not that it's a bad thing necessarily, but it's not enough. So it's not enough of a solution. And then he touches a little bit on HAVA, which is the name of the company and the app. And all of that is basically 1 minute. And then at that moment, then he can step back a little bit and he does a little bit of a self-introduction because we don't know who he is. Look, if he was someone world famous, of course, Bill Gates doesn't have to do that kind of thing. But in this case, this was really appropriate for Dr. Eenfeldt to do. Much better, I think, than starting off that way. But anyway, he spent, 30 seconds or so talking about that he was a family doctor. He's always had a passion for this subject, and he talked about things like how low carb is one way to do it, but it's very difficult to sustain completely a low carb diet. And so he says, well, we need a different way. He kind of briefly talks about how we need to combine really two things, right? So modern nutrition science, but also with the advances in AI and how AI can help, and how he uses AI with his app to help, which he's going to explain it further on. And then at the end of that, he has endorsements from customers, and then those endorsements, which I think were just the right amount. You don't want too much of that. It becomes like an infomercial, but I think that was just the right amount, and then that just segues into the problem, which is really the second part. So I've been babbling on, but what he actually did, it was only a couple of minutes actually for that really good introduction, which included a little bit of a self-introduction. Then he gets into the problem. Well, what's the problem? So it was very familiar to many of us. So highly processed foods, which are sort of addictive, and they don't have a lot of satiety. We tend to eat more. These foods make us hungry. He talks all about that. And he also talks about some of the solutions that have been tried. So you could use medications. There's calorie counting. There's lots of diets, fad diets, and more sustainable diets. But ultimately, it's not enough. And many of those solutions don't work, or at least they don't work as well as they could. So this is where then he goes into the third part, which he spends a lot of the time, which is with his solution, which is his application. And so then he broke that down into SPC, which is satiety per calorie, and plus AI. And then he spends some time just explaining that. Well, what does that mean, satiety per calorie? And he breaks that down with some nutrition education. And then he gets into some detail about the app. A year ago with his live presentation, which I was really impressed with, that he actually did it live, which can be risky, but it worked well. In this presentation here, he just used visuals behind him to show, because we want to get very quickly to the point and show a little bit how the app works. So I think he did a really good job of showing problem, solution. And then at the end, near the end, he sort of paused and said, well, there's one more thing. He admits, well, in the past year, we've had a lot of, great feedback, mostly good feedback from customers, of course. But of course, anytime you're trying to really change the world, you're going to have some critics, and that's a good thing. So he put all those up. He put all the sort of negative tweets up there on the screen. And then he said, well, let me address those. And then he goes through and shows the data and how that, yes, actually guaranteed this does work. We have the evidence. We have a year now under our belt. So I thought that was really good that he did that right at the end. And of course, the very end is the call to action. And that's where there's a, again, very short review of the problem solution. You can get the app today. This is how you get it. Go to the website, try it out. There's a free version, so there's no risk at all. So go ahead and try it for free. Get the app here, and then he just ends it with "Have a nice day," which is HAVA. That's the name of the company. So that was good. Anyway, I think it's a really good example of a problem solution presentation. It's 20 minutes, but I highly recommend that you give yourself 20 minutes and watch that. And you might be interested in the topic, since nutrition, of course, affects everybody. But I think he did a really good job.